11. And the angel said to them, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. For unto us is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord." Kapag binabanggit natin yung Christmas, agad sa ating isip, may mga images pumapasok sa mga namin. Sigurado, isa sa mga images doon yung Christmas light. Ang inyong pagbalay, decorating na ng Christmas light. Wala. O kaya, mga wrapping, mga Christmas gift, mga wrap. Yung buong tree ko paggabi, talagang the whole day, nagra-wrap. Diba? Christmas. O di naman kaya family tables. Grabe yung preparations. Next week, prepare na lang hamonada, hamon, kung na hamon. Ginahanap. Matag pa sa statistics, pag panahon ko noong Christmas, mas grabe ko ang crime ka related sa economics, related sa pera. Naghay mga mangawan, naghay mga akbay, akit bahay, taas ko lang statistics kung Pasko. So nangutan ko nga man kung Pasko, taas man ang crime rates pagdating sa, particularly sa crime related to money. Ang reason diya sa mga Pilipino ngayon tungkol kay kinahanglan sa birthday ni Jesus kumpleto Ricardo sa pagkain. Ay kung wala akong kwarta, ay wala akong kwarta, manakaw ka parang na pang birthday kay Jesus. Marami pa rin. Hinana nila siya. So in a world filled of breaking news, pag nalay mga breaking news na ganyan, kung bahala ba? Breaking news, bangkyo sa Maynila, lilog sa Davao City, kung bahala ba? Pagka-breaking news. So mayroong anxiety na pwede mo sunod sa atong kasing-kasing. But why has this Christmas message remained the ultimate good news for over 2,000 years? Ang mensahe sa angel, sobrang relevancy nito. Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy. I bring you good news. And for the past 2,000 years, inana ang good news. Christmas is related to good news. Today we look at three pillars that make Christmas a story, not just a traditional, not just a beautiful traditions na pinasa atong mga Pilipino, but a life-changing reality. Tulog ka pillars, tulog ka haligi. Ang gusto na akong i-share sa inyo kining Christmas of 2025. The first pillar is of this good news is it is a gift of divine presence. One of the pillars of Christmas is that Christmas is a gift of divine presence. Ikaduhang pillar is that Christmas is a gift of equality. Ikatulo is it's the pillar of a pillar of love. So let's look at the first one. First pillar. The first pillar is this good news is a gift of divine presence. Throughout history, many viewed God or deity or divine as distant, distansyadong Ginoo and fearsome power. Finally, in Christmas, it gives us Emmanuel, God with us. God did not send a memo. He did not send a representative. He came himself. By becoming human, God closed the gap between Creator and creation. He traded a throne for a manger to show that He cares for us. He traded the throne for a manger to show that He understands our hunger, He understands our tears, He understands our exhaustions, but most of all, He understands that all of us are separated from His presence. The good news is that God became Emmanuel, ready to be offered as a sacrifice for the forgiveness of sin, to fill in that gap between God and man, and the subsequent reconciliation, that we shall be called children of God. The good news is that the promised Savior God has finally arrived, and He brought deliverance from the things that chain us, sin. He came to liberate us from the bondage of sin. And this is why He came. This is one of the pillars of Christmas story. So Christmas tells us that the darkness of sin do not get the final word. This is why Christmas is a gift of His divine presence. The second pillar is a gift of equality. Perhaps the most radical part of the angel's message was its inclusivity. It's good news for all people without exception. However, the good news, went to the shepherd in the field first before it went to the Magi of the East. Magtataka, no? Ngano nga ang maayong balita na una sa mga tao nga giilang ng mga nobodies, people who have been overlooked, people who have been undervalued. The gospel went to them first before the gospel went to the Magi of the East, the royal people. It went to the ordinary people, mga nobody, first before it went to the royal people. This joy of forgiveness is for all people. And this is why Christmas is, there is equality, there is a inclusivity with it. Walang exception. So it doesn't matter your bank account, kung naghambaray sulod sa kwartang sa inyong bangko. It doesn't matter your past mistakes. It doesn't matter your social status. It doesn't matter your brokenness in the past, your failures. It doesn't matter. At the manger, the king and the shepherd stand in ground zero. All of us are equally loved and embraced by this God. So the good news is that God's love is a universal language spoken at every heart without exception. It is good news for everyone. It's a gift of equality. The second pillar of Christmas. And finally, the third pillar is a gift of great joy. For centuries, people waited for a sign that life would get better. Christmas is a moment where God kept His word. It proves that God is a promise keeper. When we feel like the world is chaotic, injustice is found everywhere, corruption is, ang term ginagamit yan, corruption is uncalibrated. Wala na talagang hiya. Tama ba? Wala na hiya. O hindi na nahihiya talaga ng mga tao. Hindi ko alam kung ang tama dyan. Sobra na talaga. So in a world like that, Christmas reminds us that the dawn is breaking. God has started a new story for humanity, and He is faithful to see it through to the end. It is news of great joy indeed. Let me conclude this. If this is good news, if God gave us His presence, if God's love is inclusive, and if His good news is joy, how do we respond? This is where I want to end the message. How do we respond? to this news that is good. We respond by mirroring or reflecting these pillars in our lives. Tama ba? His divine presence, God with us, must become God within us. Got to be like that. But how do we respond to this good news? How do we respond to this good news? I suggest we respond by reflecting these pillars in our life. But how? How do we reflect those pillars? By telling others that God is no longer distant reality, but He is present, He is Emmanuel. The embodiment of His presence is in us. The evidence of His presence is what? Ano ba talaga ang ebidensya ng Kanyang presence? What is really the evidence that God is with us and that God with us has become God within us? Ano ba talaga ang evidence? Confession? Maybe. Doctrinal truth? Maybe. But the evidence of His presence is my transformed life. I have become a different person. That is the evidence that God has become with us. The next question is, how do we show that we are different people now? This is where I must get into Apostle John in 1 John chapter 4 verses 11 and 12. How do we show that we are different people? 1 John chapter 4, 11 and 12, there's so many ways we could show. But John, the beloved, in 1 John chapter 4, to me, described in a way in which it cannot be denied that God's presence is with us. Look, how is that? So 1 John chapter 4, beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and His love is perfected in us. So how do we respond? How do we show that we have been transformed? How do we show that we are different people? How? 1 John chapter 4 says, we show that we're different. We show that God has transformed us by loving God back. And how do we love Him back? Let's just suppose God is here, and He is, definitely. And He's asking us, do you want to love me back? How would you answer? Paano mo sasagutin si Lord? If God is asking you right now, do you want to love me back because of the love I gave to you? What do you think is your answer? Do you really want to love me back? How do you respond to that? Mag-attempt. This is what John is saying. You love me back when you love one another. That's how you show me you love me. That is how you love me. You respond to me in love is by responding to love one another. That's how you love me. And this is the question. Why one another? In 1 John, kasi ang focus one another eh. Why within the family of God? Why not outside of the family of God? Bakit hindi ganun ang focus ni John? Sa loob. I think one of the answers, I may be wrong, but I think one of the answers is because I think it's easier to love people outside of God's family than loving the member of God's family. Mas sayon higugmaon ang tao na sa gawas kaysa mga tao na sa sulod. Yes? Sayop siguro ba? Sayop siguro ba? Huh? But John says, love one another. He didn't say love your enemies or love those outside of you. He's focused on within. Why within? Why not focusing outside of God's family? You know why? I will not engage into elaborate this, but John's congregation, the church of John that he was pastoring, there was hatred, there was division within the church, and the only way that can be rectified is by loving one another. That's the reason why the focus is everyone. Conflict thrives on pride, but love thrives in humility and sacrifice. When we choose to love one another by listening, forgiving, serving, or yielding, we reflect Christ's love, which is the ultimate cure of division. That is why John focuses on loving one another. Let me ask you again, if God asks you a question, do you want to love me? How do you respond? By loving your neighbors. Tingnan nga yung mga kapitbahay mo, ibig mo mga yan. And so Paul wrote in Colossians 3:14, above all these things put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. The power and credibility to proclaim the message of Christmas to others lies in the way we love one another in our unity. That is the most credible. That is the power of the gospel. If you want to broadcast the good news of the kingdom outside to other people, loving one another in unity must take place first. Yeah. That is how we love. That is how we respond to the pillars of Christmas. We just listen from the message of the angel. Merry Christmas po.